Thank you so much for joining us here at the Pecora Photo Factory at South by Southwest. Super excited that all of you came out, and most excited to have Jonah Keri from ESPN's Grantland.com here.
I'm happy to be here.
So Jonah's just recently released the softcover version of his new book, Up, and Away, about the Montreal Expos, and we got, looks like an Expos fan over here.
He's got multiple loyalties going on.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the future of sports journalism and social media. So really a topic that connects with a lot of people here at South by. I've had a lot of good conversations about people sort of exploring new technologies, and also we want to find out what brands are doing, what teams are doing, what the leagues are doing, and sort of the way that the fan experience is changing. So super excited to have you here, Jonah. I guess the first thing I want to just ask is, what's going on at South by with you?
We need to back up a second. I'll tell the. So for people who didn't notice the music selection earlier, Wes was playing a song called Hanging by a Moment by a band called Lifehouse. And on Wednesday I took a flight from Los Angeles to Denver, and the band Lifehouse played on my flight. No, not oh wow. It was horrible. Whatever your favorite band is, if they're playing 2 feet from you, when you're kind of bleary-eyed and spilling pretzels on yourself, it's horrible. And I don't really care for Lifehouse, I guess. And I'm a very nice, friendly guy, but I couldn't take it, and I started tweeting. And I was tweeting mostly for the benefit of a couple friends, and started getting more aggressive. At one point, they say, time for a new single, Hurricane. I go, you guys are playing their new single, Hurricane, as in I hope a hurricane knocks this plane out of the sky, and we all die. And this is going on for like a half an hour. I'm getting meaner and meaner, very mean. And then, as we're getting off the plane, this guy was sitting next to me, very well put together businessman in his 40s, goes up to them, they're still on the plane, and says, hey, can I get a picture with you? And I go, oh, I need to get a picture with Lifehouse, after being super dickish to them. And I took a picture with them, and I'm like, like that. And I was saying to Wes that, whatever I do, whatever book, anything I accomplish in life, I will never blow up like I did for this Lifehouse garbage. It was on Jezebel, Billboard, Stereo Gum, and last night I get a text from a buddy of mine. He says, you're on TMZ right now. So that was fun.
So you'll be hanging by a moment for the rest
I'm going to be hanging by a moment, so everything is colored by that, and people are messaging me and saying, I'm going to see you South by, I'm either going to see Wes's thing, or we got a thing tonight, the Ginger Man too, and like, I'm going to bring a Lifehouse t-shirt, you need to wear it. So the whole weekend is being colored by this incident, I think.
I really shorted you a true introduction to Lifehouse top search result.
Yes, like if you search the band Lifehouse, it's literally like, here's the band Lifehouse, here's Jonah Keri trolling the hell out of this band. Yeah, right.
So going
Guys, it's too nice.
So going back to South by, so you've got a number of things going on here. I know you guys have Grantland has a studio set up.
Yeah, at the Four Seasons where the South by
Most
Sports
of you are
is
staying there, I think, so you'll be able to.
I'm not either, so whatever. Maybe some of my colleagues are. I'm not one of the fancy ones. Yeah, Simmons was interviewing Aubrey Plaza when we were leaving. I was like, damn, I want to come in. Yeah, so all kinds of stuff going on over there. And Remember Brown is here. Kirk Goldsberry, who lives in Austin, who's awesome. And just there's a bunch of us here. And yeah, it's I think it's well suited. Like it seems like the event goes well with us. And my thing, this is awesome. And then tonight at the Ginger Man at 8 o'clock, apparently there's a party bus and unlimited booze, I'm told. And we have the whole bar. And the bar fits 250 people, and I think 400 have signed up. So yeah, it's going to be interesting what's going to happen, but it should be fun. It's me, Brian Curtis, who was here yesterday. Was great, right?
Fantastic guy.
Brian Curtis from Grantland, and Drew McGarry from Deadspin, who's like I'm kind of the PG-13 version of Drew McGarry. Drew McGarry gives 0 Fs. You'll see. It's a lot of fun. So that should be a lively talk, especially after a couple beers.
At 8 o'clock at the Ginger Man. We'll be there too with the photo booth experience. Yep. So really looking forward to that. I want to circle back to sort of the way we first got connected, which was about your new book, Up, and Away. Tell me what inspired that. Obviously, you're well known as an Expos fan, kind of the face of Montreal Expos in the modern era. But writing a book is no small task.
Yeah.
Tell me about.
Sure. Tell me and talk about. I'd written a previous book about the Tampa Bay Rays called The Extra 2%, which is like, when people ask me what do you do, I say, oh, I'm a homeless man's Michael Lewis. That's how I describe myself. And So it was kind of like a homeless man's version of Moneyball, basically, and analytical, whatever. And my editor on that book was an American who'd gone to McGill in Montreal, and he became an Expos fan. And so when that book ended, we talk about the Expos all the time, and I'm from Montreal. When that book ended, he said, we should collaborate on a book about the Expos. I said, nobody gives a fig about the Expos. Nobody's going to read this thing. And he had to convince me. I was reluctant. I was like, oh, it's my favorite team. I could talk to Pedro Martinez. No, I don't want to do that, which is ridiculous in retrospect. But yeah, we chatted and eventually he convinced me. And what's interesting is that was in 2011. And since then, a lot has happened, actually. They had 2 exhibition games at Olympic Stadium. There were 97,000 people at the stadium. And
I understand you crowd surfed the entire route.
I more or less did, yeah. It's very strange to have this one super specific niche where in that niche it's like, oh, it's that guy's here, yeah. So it was, I don't know.
The Lighthouse guy.
The Lighthouse guy. It was very fun, and you know, you get to interview your childhood heroes. Like if you grew up a Giants fan or Yankees fan, whatever, you get to interview Don Mattingly or whoever the hell, Barry Bonds, whatever it is you like.
Glenn Allen Hill.
Glenn Allen Hill, big juicer, huge.
Me too.
Yeah, man. Well, listen, if you could take a pill and make Pecora 50% more successful, you would at least think about it.
I mean, that was always my thing. I played baseball in college, and one of the things people would always, it was in part of the steroid era, people were like, how could you do this? You know, if you're a baseball player, blah, blah, blah. I was like, if you came to me, I throw 86. If you come to me tomorrow and say, take this, you'll throw 96? Where is it?
Hell yeah!
It's in me before you.
There are no long-term health repercussions because we figured it all out now. Kind of into it. There's a pill, like my kids are guaranteed to go to Harvard if you take this. Yeah, I'm gonna take this. Let's do it.
That's logical, right? I mean, that's incentive.
I get it's not, maybe not everybody thinks that way, but I don't know. I'm not really bothered. This is off track a little bit, but yeah, if you're asking, I'm not bothered by it. In fact, if I had to think about what I would do for my next book, I would try to do a Bonds book, but not a hatchet job. Like a real, let's talk, you know, asking in point blank about that stuff, but not fluffy, but fair. You know, that's what I would try to do.
You heard it here first. Next year, South by Southwest, Jonah Keri,
Bonds
Barry
book.
Bonds book.
If anybody knows Barry Bonds, send it my way.
So, you talked about interviewing Pedro, and I know you did a number of interviews with people here.
Yeah.
I'd love it if you could just share a couple of stories that maybe were things that you didn't know about, things that were going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, so one of the big things about, if you write about any baseball team from the late 70s and the early 80s, is cocaine. And the Expos were like, in addition to the Pittsburgh Pirates, were ground zero for cocaine. And my favorite player of all time is Tim Raines, and Tim Raines in 1982. So his nickname is Rock. The reason his nickname is Rock is because he's built and he's kind of a stocky guy. He became subsequently known as Rock because he literally had a vial of cocaine in his back pocket while sliding into second base, making sure he was doing it head first, by the way, to not break the vial. That story's kind of well known. The guy who was the poster boy for this is a guy named Ellis Valentine. Super talented guy, like on par with Andre Dawson and all those guys.
Crazy throwing arm.
Crazy throwing arm. In fact, the Expos have had a lot of Vladdy and Larry Walker, Dawson, and Valentine. And he was the biggest partier of all. He loved women, and when I say loved women, I mean not threesomes and foursomes, like 12somes more or less. Like that was kind of the normal MO. And big coke guy. And there was a story that it was the All-Star game one year. He didn't make the All-Star team. And so everybody had 3 days. You just have to get yourself to the next city. So they were going to play Dodger Stadium. 45 minutes before the game, Ellis Valentine's not there. What's going on? Kind of send somebody out to the parking lot, like the trainer or whatever, to look at the parking lot. A car screeches into the parking lot going 70 in the parking lot. Goes right in front of like where the player entrance is. The car door opens. They push this guy out, unconscious. It's Ellis Valentine. Holy crap! And they literally had to carry him to the dugout. He was not conscious for the whole first game after the All-Star break. I should preface this by saying that he's 28 years sober and an awesome guy and works for charity and stuff, but he kind of pissed his career a little bit away. And this was a normal thing, by the way. This happened to a lot of guys. That was one. There was a good story about this guy, Bill Stoneman, pitched in the early 70s. Less sensationalistic, but just more like a sign of the times. You had to do military service back then, so he was working the National Guard. So he would be in Vermont. So he went from Montreal to Vermont, 2.5 hours. One day he has to get up at 3 a.m. Him and his teammate go. But he's not pitching that night. They're pitchers, so it's not a problem. about halfway through the day, it becomes clear that he has to pitch that night. He's woken up at 3 a.m. He's gone down to do military service in the States. He's got to drive back. Horrible traffic on the border. Go, go, go. They make it to the stadium. It's like 5 minutes before game time. He's putting on his uniform in his pickup truck and is running through this parking lot in the spikes 5 minutes before the first pitch to a Major League Baseball game. And people are like, hey, Bill. He's like, hey, running. And so it's just like little nuggets like that. The book has big picture topics. Oh, why did the Expos leave? Why didn't this work? Tell me about this guy. How good was this guy? But it's the little things like that that define it. And what I say to people is, if the book worked, I'm proud of it. I think it went well. It's a tribute to the candor and just great nature of these people, players, GMs, managers, fans, politicians, whoever. And they were just like, let's chat. Like, oh, you're interested? I'll tell you all kinds of stories.
That's great. I think the benefit of time allows them to tell you those stories. Because I'm just imagining the way this will be my trend, my segue right here. The way that sports is covered now is just so different than it was 20, 30 years ago. If you had a guy rolling out of a car unconscious before a game, that's national news. Back then, not such a big thing. Now the job of journalists, the job of a player even, has changed so much because of that change in the relationship. What are some of the things that you've seen in the past, even 5 years, that have sort of, even your day-to-day has changed? I mean, you're spending time on Twitter, you're spending time on Instagram.
Yeah, we're just trying to make it interesting. I mean, the players have a presence on Twitter and Instagram and stuff too, which is, and I'm not friendly with that many players, but there are a few, and so you just find yourself actually corresponding with them. It's like having conversations on Twitter with a ball player, and then people start following along. Molly Knight, who's a colleague at ESPN, she had a great conversation with a Dodgers pitcher named Brandon McCarthy, who's very active on social, and it was about that. It was about how is the game changing, how do you cover baseball? So she's giving her perspective, he's giving his perspective on what kind of questions does he like to be asked, what bothers him, what's good, and you have to follow it. They weren't like doing a,
There's a great store file. Someone actually,
yeah, they
put it together.
Go to Molly Knight, Brandon McCarthy store file, and then just Debbie changing tweets, and it just goes back and forth. They're both very thoughtful people. Molly's a friend, and really, really interesting. And it just comes down to, but I feel like the lesson is the same. Like even if it was the '60s. Don't ask dumb questions, how are you feeling or whatever. That's not interesting. Try to ask detailed stuff. It's easy for me, because I'm a huge nerd, so I'd be like, tell me about when you throw the fork ball instead of the screwball in that situation. What were you thinking? And they'll be like, oh, okay, well, we can talk about that, that's fine. And it kind of catches them for a loop a little. So yeah, I just feel like that's a common denominator, but at the same time, because there's social media and all that, that almost forces you to even try harder to ask good questions because they have their own platform. I mean, because I work for Grantland, which is affiliated with ESPN, I still have a little bit of juice with them, but like it's going to get to the point where they can pretty much call their own shot. So there has to be a reason that they're going to let you in and share things with you, and engaging them intelligently, I think, is the way to do that.
I think you touched on a real key thing there. We talked to Brian Curtis, as you mentioned yesterday, and he was talking about how the change in the audience has raised the demands as a journalist. You can't really just come up with these sort of unsupported hot takes because the fans are looking at analytics. The fans are data.
I work with some people who have some unsupported hot takes. I'm not saying who. They're on television.
Continue. But yeah, I mean, it feels like we are entering a new age of journalism where there's such a demand, not just from the athletes like Marshawn Lynch who want not be asked to talk about questions, but also the fans who don't want to just hear about, oh, I talked to this guy, here's what he said, but this guy over his last 400 fastballs has had this success against this type of hitter, and really getting in depth. And because of that sort of general manager mentality of, as a fan, no longer am I dreaming about throwing fastballs or throwing down hammer dunks. I want to be that GM. I'm most interested in the decision-making process and putting myself into that role. And that seems to be a real change in the audience. Have you noticed the way that you write has to change, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an audience for that stuff, and people want to read about what's the GM doing. I'm doing this for the White Sox right now. I spent, a good part of a day in the clubhouse. I talked to one player. And it was because I was seeking a specific angle. Most of it was talking to the general manager, Rick Hahn, and to some extent the manager, Robin Ventura. I talked to their head of marketing and ticket sales for 30 minutes, but only talked to one player. And it was kind of by design. It was sort of that kind of story. People really like to get into the nitty-gritty that way. I have this funny existential, not crisis, but just sort of self-debate sometimes. Would I be a journalist at all, or would I get anywhere if I was doing this 40 years ago, trying this? Which is, it's a weird parallel universe, but maybe not. And maybe I would adjust and whatever, find another way to ask some more questions, I don't know. But it's a good time for somebody like me. My dad bought me my first Bill James abstract when I was 8 years old. 8. And I read it and understood it and really liked it. And I've always been influenced by that stuff. And I can remember went to college in the late 90s. I came out of college and I wanted a job in sports writing. It was hard to do. I was really,
Because you knew you were going to be rich. You know, on your
man. As a Jew, I'm like, no, I'm not going to be a doctor and a lawyer. I'm going to be a sports writer. My parents are going to be super proud of me. No. I wanted that, and at the local newspaper in Montreal, you couldn't really get that. Somebody, the local columnist would have to die, otherwise you're writing about high school field hockey for 20 years. No disrespect if you like field hockey, but yeah. And this went on for a while, and I was trying to figure it out. And I eventually became a business writer, and I did that for a long time actually before I kind of got into sports full time, because that was a better opportunity. And I remember in the late 90s, the only people that were doing what I kind of wanted to do, as in they could write with passion, they could write intelligently, but they weren't beholden to the kind of the newspaper system, didn't have to pay their dues or whatever. There were two people. One was Rob Nyer, who's now one of my 3 or 4 best friends in the world, and he's like the prototype for what I do. And the other one is Bill Simmons, who's now my boss. So it's kind of funny how that stuff works out. It's like, eventually the marketplace will find you. If you're 22 and you're coming out of college and you're really good at this one thing, it took me until age 37 to find the job that I wanted. And I feel like that's, when I tell people that, they're like, oh, that's good. Like, I'm 31, I'm figuring out, like, you're good, you got time, it's fine.
So I think one of the big themes at any event, and definitely at South by Southwest and with Pecora, is of course content. Is creating content and being found on the internet. Creating valuable content is the way that you can engage with an audience successfully. Whether you're a writer, you're a brand, you're a team, that just coming up with new ways, innovative ways to engage your audience seems to be a big thing. I think at Grantland, you guys are doing a lot of different things. You've got a podcast that you do. It seems like everybody is now doing TV, print, podcasts. I mean, taking pictures, going on. Is that something that you guys consciously do? You want to go and explore? And, okay, Jonah, you're going to go here and cover this. We need to have you do these sort of separate different types of media, as opposed to 20 years ago, it might have just been you come back with 1,500 words.
We're very self-driven that way. It really depends on the writer. We can call our own shots. Zach Lowe is my favorite sports writer in America. He covers basketball for Grantland. I don't think there's anybody better in the industry working today. I would say that if I didn't work for Grantland, I would say that if I disliked Grantland, Zach's amazing. And he and I are different. I'm more of an extrovert, and I'm super happy to do TV. I do Baseball Tonight. I'm on the Goldman Show a bunch. I love it. I would do it all the time. I wouldn't say that I quit writing, but I would definitely make the ratio more like a lot more TV than it is now, and that's actually something that I'm working on and hopefully will happen. Zach doesn't really love doing that. When he started a podcast, it was kind of reluctant. It's actually a good podcast now, but it took a while because I kind of had to, he's just a little bit more studious, cerebral, introverted, what have you. Again, phenomenal show, but different. So they let us dictate the terms of how we want to do that, but it plays. I did a few weeks ago, we were in Vegas and I was drafting this crazy fantasy league, which